In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the night. Sir Reginald Ashby lies dead, a letter-opener in his heart, his will vanished. Who among the elegant guests, his nervous wife, a secretive doctor, a scorned niece hiding her name, wields the hand of a killer? Why was a pearl earring left at the scene, and what secrets does a hidden note conceal? Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, unravels a web of betrayal, love and vengeance. Will the truth emerge before the murderer strikes again? Dive into the Nemesis enigma, where every clue counts and no heart is innocent. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late summer sun cast a golden sheen over the rolling hills of Dorset, where Blackthorn Manor stood like a sentinel of a bygone era. Its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys spoke of wealth and tradition, but to Captain Arthur Hastings, who gazed upon it from the window of his hired car, there was an indefinable air of unease about the place. The invitation, penned in an elegant looping hand, had arrived at his London flat 3 days prior, summoning him to a weekend gathering at the behest of Sir Reginald Ashby, a retired diplomat with a reputation for both charm and secrecy. Hastings, ever susceptible to the lure of a country house weekend, had accepted, though the cryptic note, "A matter of some delicacy requires your presence," had piqued his curiosity. As the car crunched along the gravel drive, Hastings adjusted his tie and surveyed the scene. The manor's gardens were meticulously tended, roses blooming in precise rows, yet the air felt heavy, as though the very stones of the house harboured secrets. He stepped out, his suitcase in hand, and was greeted by a butler, one Mr. Grayson, whose impeccable demeanour belied a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "Captain Hastings, sir," Grayson intoned, bowing slightly. "Sir Reginald awaits you in the drawing-room. The other guests have already arrived." The drawing-room was a vision of opulence, crystal chandeliers, mahogany panelling, and a roaring fire, despite the warmth of the day. Sir Reginald, a tall man with silver hair and a commanding presence, rose to greet Hastings. His handshake was firm, but his smile did not reach his eyes. "Captain Hastings, how good of you to come," Sir Reginald said. "I trust the journey was pleasant." "Quite, thank you," Hastings replied, his gaze sweeping the room. The other guests, an eclectic assembly, stood in small clusters, their conversations hushed. There was Lady Beatrice Ashby, Sir Reginald's much younger wife, her beauty as striking as her nervous habit of twisting her pearl necklace. Beside her stood Dr. Philip Warrender, a physician with a sharp jaw and sharper eyes, who seemed to watch everyone with clinical detachment. Miss Clara Dunworth, a spinster of indeterminate age, clutched a leather-bound book, her lips pursed in disapproval. Then there was Mr. Victor Lyle, a brash young businessman whose laugh grated on Hastings's nerves, and his fiancée, Miss Evelyn Carver, whose delicate features were marred by a distracted air. Finally, Colonel Rupert Marlowe, a retired military man with a booming voice, rounded out the party, his anecdotes already testing the patience of the room. The gathering was ostensibly to celebrate Sir Reginald's 60th birthday, but Hastings sensed an undercurrent of tension. Lady Beatrice's smiles were too brittle, Doctor, Warrender's glances too calculating, and Miss Dunworth's muttered remarks about worldly excesses too pointed. Dinner, served promptly at 8, did little to dispel the unease. The conversation turned to Sir Reginald's recent revision of his will, a topic that seemed to tighten every jaw at the table. "It's a simple matter," Sir Reginald said, swirling his wine. "One must ensure one's legacy is secure. I've made provisions for all who deserve them." Lady Beatrice's fork clattered against her plate. "Reginald, must we discuss this now?" she asked, her voice sharp. "My dear, it's merely a formality," he replied, but his tone was cool. Hastings noted the exchange, his instincts honed by years of association with his friend Hercule Poirot. Something was amiss, though he could not yet put his finger on it. As the evening drew to a close, Sir Reginald invited the guests to the library for brandy. The room was a scholar's dream, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. On it lay a sealed envelope marked simply Will. Hastings's eyes lingered on it, as did those of several others. Miss Dunworth, in particular, seemed transfixed, her fingers twitching as though she longed to snatch it up. "Tomorrow," Sir Reginald announced, "we shall have a small ceremony to mark the occasion. My solicitor, Mr. Hargreaves, will join us to finalize matters. Until then, I bid you all good night." The guests dispersed to their rooms, but Hastings lingered, his mind racing. He retired to his chamber, a spacious room overlooking the gardens, and sat at the writing desk, penning a quick note to Poirot. His friend had been detained in London on another matter, but Hastings felt an inexplicable urge to summon him. "My dear Poirot," he wrote, "there is something queer about this place. I could not say what, but your little grey cells would find much to ponder. If you can, come at once." He sealed the letter and rang for Grayson, who promised to have it posted first thing in the morning. As Hastings prepared for bed, the manor seemed to settle into an uneasy silence, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. He could not shake the feeling that Blackthorn Manor was a stage, and the curtain was about to rise on a tragedy. The clock struck midnight. A scream pierced the stillness, high and sharp, echoing through the corridors. Hastings leapt from his bed, his heart pounding. He threw on a dressing gown and rushed into the hallway, where he collided with Colonel Marlowe, whose face was ashen. "It came from downstairs," Marlowe barked, already striding toward the staircase. Hastings followed, joined by Doctor Warrender and Miss Carver, her eyes wide with fear. They descended to the library, where the door stood ajar. Inside, sprawled across the oak desk, lay Sir Reginald Ashby, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A letter opener, its blade stained crimson, protruded from his chest. The sealed envelope marked Will was gone. Hastings knelt beside the body, his military training kicking in. No pulse, no breath. Sir Reginald was dead, murdered in his own home. The other guests gathered at the door, their gasps and murmurs filling the air. Lady Beatrice clutched Dr. Warrender's arm, her face a mask of horror. Miss Dunworth whispered a prayer, while Mr. Lyle's bravado faltered, his hands trembling. Only one thing was certain. The killer was among them. As the clock ticked toward 1 a.m., Hastings made a decision. He would wire Poirot immediately. This was no ordinary crime, and only the meticulous mind of Hercule Poirot could unravel the enigma of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a tableau of chaos and dread, its scholarly serenity shattered by the grim presence of Sir Reginald Ashby's body. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows across the oak-panelled walls. Captain Hastings stood near the desk, his gaze fixed on the letter opener embedded in Sir Reginald's chest, its silver handle gleaming dully in the lamplight. The sealed envelope marked will, which had drawn such attention the previous evening, was conspicuously absent. The air was thick with the scent of old books, cigar smoke, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Dr. Philip Warrender, ever the man of action, pushed past the cluster of guests at the door and knelt beside the body. His fingers probed Sir Reginald's wrist, then his neck, though the gesture seemed more perfunctory than hopeful. "He's been dead for at least an hour," Warrender announced, his voice clipped. "The wound is precise, straight to the heart." Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Lady Beatrice Ashby, her face pale as porcelain, clung to the doorframe. "Who could do such a thing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Reginald, he had enemies, yes, but this, in our own home." Colonel Rupert Marlowe, his military bearing strained, barked, "We must secure the house at once. The murderer could still be here." His eyes darted to the windows, which were firmly latched, their heavy curtains undisturbed. Hastings, striving to maintain calm, raised a hand. "Let us not act rashly, Colonel. We must preserve the scene for the police, and for my friend Hercule Poirot. He will make sense of this." "Poirot?" Miss Clara Dunworth's voice was sharp, her thin lips curling with disdain. "That foreign detective? What could he possibly do that the local constabulary cannot?" Hastings bristled but held his tongue. "He has a way of seeing what others miss," he replied evenly. "I've wired him already. He'll be here by morning." Miss Evelyn Carver, her delicate frame shivering despite the shawl draped over her shoulders, murmured, "But who would want to kill Sir Reginald? And why take the will?" Her fiancé, Victor Lyle, stood beside her, his usual bluster subdued. He muttered something about business rivals, but his eyes avoided the body. Grayson, the butler, appeared at the door, his composure fraying. "I've telephoned the police, sir," he said to Hastings. "They'll be here within the hour. I've also instructed the staff to remain in their quarters." "Good man," Hastings said, nodding. He turned to the group. "Until the police arrive, no one is to touch anything in this room. We must all return to our rooms and wait." The guests murmured their assent, though reluctance hung heavy in the air. As they dispersed, Hastings lingered, his eyes scanning the library. The desk was cluttered with papers, a half-empty brandy glass, and a silver cigarette case engraved with Sir Reginald's initials. A single sheet of blotting paper lay askew, its surface marked with faint ink smudges. Hastings resisted the urge to examine it closely. Poirot would want everything untouched. He noted the time on the mantel clock, 1:15 a.m. The scream had come just after midnight, meaning the murder had likely occurred between 11:30 p.m. when the guests retired and 12:05 a.m. when the scream alerted the household. Hastings made a mental note of the alibis he'd overheard in the chaos. Lady Beatrice claimed to have been in her room, reading. Dr. Warrender said he was writing letters in his study. Colonel Marlowe insisted he was asleep. Miss Dunworth had been praying in her room, and Lyle and Miss Carver swore they were together in the drawing-room, discussing wedding plans. Each alibi would need scrutiny, but that was Poirot's domain. As Hastings left the library, he caught sight of a small object on the floor near the desk. A pearl earring, its luster catching the firelight. He hesitated, then left it where it lay. Poirot would want to see it in situ. With a final glance at Sir Reginald's lifeless form, Hastings returned to his room, his mind racing. The killer was among them, and the missing will was the key to the motive. But why now, and why such a brutal method? The police arrived at 2 a.m., led by Inspector Jarvis, a stout man with a bristling moustache and a no-nonsense air. He surveyed the scene with a practised eye, barking orders to his constables to secure the library and interview the staff. Hastings provided a brief account of the evening, omitting his suspicions about the guests' alibis. That, he knew, was best left to Poirot. By dawn, the manor was a hive of activity. The police had cordoned off the Chichester library, and the guests were confined to the drawing room, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Hastings stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the gardens, when a familiar figure appeared on the drive. Hercule Poirot, his small, neat frame unmistakable even from a distance. He stepped from a taxi, his black patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache perfectly waxed. In his hand was a telegram, Hastings's summons. "Mon ami," Poirot called as he entered the drawing-room, his green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You have a knack for finding trouble, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings managed a weak smile. "I knew you'd come, Poirot. It's a bad business. Sir Reginald Ashby, murdered in his library. The will is missing, and everyone here has a motive." Poirot's gaze swept the room, taking in the tense faces of the guests. "Bon," he said softly. "A puzzle, then. And Hercule Poirot loves nothing more than a puzzle. Tell me everything, Hastings, from the beginning." As Hastings recounted the events of the previous evening, the dinner, the talk of the will, the scream, the discovery of the body, Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled before him. When Hastings mentioned the missing will and the pearl earring, Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A pearl, you say? And where was it found?" "Near the desk, just by the rug," Hastings replied. "I left it for you to see." "Très bien," Poirot murmured. "You have done well not to disturb it. The little details, Hastings, they are the threads that unravel the tapestry of crime." Inspector Jarvis joined them, his expression sceptical. "Mr. Poirot, is it? I've heard of you. But this is a straightforward case. Someone wanted that will, and they killed Sir Reginald to get it. We'll have the culprit by noon." Poirot's smile was polite, but tinged with amusement. "Straightforward, you say? Mon cher Inspector, nothing is straightforward where the human heart is concerned. Permit me to examine the scene, and we shall see what the little grey cells reveal." The library was as Hastings had left it, save for the police tape and the chalk outline around Sir Reginald's body, which had been removed to the morgue. Poirot moved with deliberate grace, his eyes darting from the desk to the windows to the rug. He paused at the spot where the earring lay, crouching to examine it without touching it. A single earring, he mused. Curieux. And the blotting paper. Did you notice the smudges, Hastings? "I did," Hastings said, "but I couldn't make sense of them." Poirot produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket and studied the paper. Words, reversed, as one would expect, but the ink, it is fresh, no more than a few hours old. Someone wrote a note last night, and it was blotted here. He turned to the cigarette case, opening it with a gloved hand. Inside were 3 cigarettes, one slightly bent. Sir Reginald was a meticulous man, no, yet this case is not quite perfect. And the brandy glass, only one, though 2 were drinking here last night, were they not? Hastings frowned. "How did you know that?" Poirot tapped his temple. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what the eyes do not. Now, let us speak to these guests of yours. Each one, I suspect, has a story to tell and a secret to hide." As they left the library, Poirot's expression was one of quiet determination. The game, as he often called it, had begun, and Hercule Poirot was never one to lose. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor's drawing-room, doing little to dispel the pall of suspicion that hung over the gathered guests. The air was thick with the scent of strong tea and the faint crackle of nervous tension. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, watching as Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit and polished shoes, surveyed the room with the keen eye of a hawk. His moustache twitched slightly, a sure sign that his little grey cells were already at work. The guests sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of emotions. Lady Beatrice Ashby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, stared at the floor. Dr. Philip Warrender leaned against the mantel, his expression unreadable. Miss Clara Dunworth clutched her prayer book, her lips moving silently. Victor Lyle paced near the window, his brash confidence replaced by agitation. Miss Evelyn Carver sat beside him, her delicate fingers twisting a handkerchief. And Colonel Rupert Marlowe, his military posture rigid, glared at Poirot as though the detective's presence were a personal affront. Inspector Jarvis, who had been barking orders to his constables outside, re-entered the room, his moustache bristling with impatience. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his tone barely civil, "I've allowed you to poke around, but this is a police matter. We've interviewed the staff, and they saw nothing. The killer is one of this lot, mark my words." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but enigmatic. "Mon cher inspecteur, your diligence is commendable. But permit Hercule Poirot to ask a few questions of his own. The truth, it is like a fine tapestry. One must examine each thread carefully." Jarvis grunted but stepped aside, gesturing to the guests. "Have at it, then, but don't waste my time." Poirot turned to the group, his green eyes gleaming with quiet authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, a terrible crime has been committed. Sir Reginald Ashby, a man of distinction, lies dead, and his will, a document of great importance, has vanished. I wish to understand each of you, your movements, your thoughts, your reasons for being here. Let us begin with you, Lady Beatrice." Lady Beatrice started, her pearl necklace clicking as she touched it nervously. "Me? I was in my room after dinner, reading. I heard nothing until the scream." Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "And what were you reading, madame?" "Something to soothe the nerves, perhaps." "A novel," she said quickly. "Jane Austen. I don't recall which one." "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "Austen is soothing, yet your hands, they tremble. Perhaps the events of the evening were more unsettling than you admit." Lady Beatrice flushed, her eyes darting to Dr. Warrender, who cleared his throat. "If I may," Warrender interjected. "Lady Beatrice was understandably distressed. I checked on her after dinner, around 10:30, to offer a mild sedative. She was in her room, as she says." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And you, Doctor?" "Where were you when the scream was heard?" "In my study, writing letters," Warrender replied smoothly. "I was catching up on correspondence. I heard the scream and came at once." "Letters," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. And these letters, they were urgent, to keep you from your bed at such an hour? Warrender's jaw tightened. Personal matters. I don't see how they're relevant. Everything is relevant, Poirot said softly. He turned to Miss Dunworth, who sat ramrod straight, her eyes narrowed. Mademoiselle, you were praying, I believe, when the tragedy occurred. Yes, Miss Dunworth said, her voice sharp. In my room, as is my habit. I heard the scream and came downstairs. This house, it is full of sin. I warned Sir Reginald, but he would not listen. Sin? Poirot tilted his head. A strong word. What sin did you see in Sir Reginald? Miss Dunworth's lips pursed. His pride, his wealth, his associations. Her gaze flickered to Lady Beatrice, then away. Poirot's eyes followed the glance, but said nothing. Instead, he addressed Colonel Marlowe. Colonel, you are a man of action. Where were you when the scream pierced the night? Asleep, Marlowe barked. Retired at 11, dead to the world until that infernal noise woke me. Ran downstairs and found the poor blighter dead. And you, Monsieur Lyle? Poirot asked, turning to the young businessman who had stopped pacing. Lyle shrugged, his hands in his pockets. Evelyn and I were in the drawing-room, talking about our wedding. We didn't hear anything until the scream. Miss Carver nodded, her voice barely audible. It's true, we were together. Poirot's moustache twitched. Together, yet so absorbed that you heard nothing. The manor, it is not so large. A curious thing, no? Lyle bristled. What are you implying, Poirot? Merely observing, Poirot said, his tone mild. He turned to Hastings. Mon ami, you have been most quiet. What do you recall of the moments before the scream? Hastings straightened, aware of the eyes upon him. I was in my room, writing a letter to you as it happens. I heard the scream just after midnight and ran downstairs. Colonel Marlowe was already in the hall and we found Sir Reginald in the library. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. Bon! And the scream, whose voice was it? The guests exchanged glances, their silence heavy. Finally, Lady Beatrice spoke. I think it was mine. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the library to fetch a book. When I saw Reginald, her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You went to the library after midnight, madame. Yet you did not mention this before. Why? I was afraid, she whispered. I thought people might think I had something to do with it. Inspector Jarvis snorted. Sounds like a confession to me. No, Poirot said, raising a hand. Let us not leap to conclusions. The truth, it is not so easily caught. I must see the library again, Inspector, if you permit. Jarvis grumbled but led the way. The library was as they had left it, save for the absence of the body. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his eyes scanning every detail. He paused at the desk where the blotting paper still lay. Hastings, you mentioned the smudges. Let us see what they reveal. Using his magnifying glass, Poirot examined the paper closely. Words, yes, but faint. To my beloved. And something about inheritance. A fragment of a letter, perhaps, or the will itself. But why was it blotted here? He moved to the pearl earring still on the rug. This earring, it is exquisite. A single pearl set in gold. Whose is it, I wonder? He glanced at Hastings, who shook his head. I didn't see anyone wearing it last night, Hastings said, but Lady Beatrice had a pearl necklace. Précisément, Poirot murmured. He turned to the cigarette case, opening it again. 3 cigarettes, 1 bent. Sir Reginald was a smoker, yes? Yet the glass of brandy, only 1. If he was drinking with someone, where is the second glass? Jarvis, growing impatient, said, "Maybe the killer took it. Or maybe there wasn't one." Poirot smiled faintly. "Or perhaps it was removed to hide a clue. The little details, Inspector, they speak louder than the loudest confession." As they returned to the drawing-room, Poirot addressed the guests once more. "Mes amis, I ask you to remain here today. The police will guard the exits, and I will speak with each of you in turn. The truth it will not hide from Hercule Poirot." The guests murmured, some in protest, others in resignation. Hastings watched his friend, marvelling at the calm assurance in his demeanour. Poirot was in his element, a hunter stalking the truth through a maze of lies. But as Hastings glanced at the faces around him, Lady Beatrice's tear-streaked cheeks, Warrender's cold detachment, Dunworth's righteous indignation, he felt a chill. One of them was a murderer, and the game had only just begun. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The morning at Blackthorn Manor had grown oppressive, the bright sunlight filtering through the drawing-room windows, only serving to highlight the strain on the faces of the gathered guests. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, neat figure commanding attention despite his unassuming stature. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, moved from one guest to another, as if peeling back the layers of their carefully constructed facades. Captain Hastings, seated near the fireplace, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Poirot's method, he knew, was to probe gently but relentlessly, seeking the contradictions that lay hidden in the smallest details. Inspector Jarvis, hovering near the door, shifted impatiently. "Mr. Poirot, we've got statements from everyone. The staff saw nothing, and the guests' alibis are shaky at best. I say we focus on Lady Beatrice. She was in the library, by her own admission." Poirot raised a hand, his expression serene but firm. "Patience, mon cher Inspector. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It requires time to breathe. Let us begin with the interviews, and we shall see what emerges." He turned to Lady Beatrice Ashby, who sat on a velvet settee, her hands twisting her pearl necklace until Hastings feared it might snap. "Madam," Poirot began, his voice soft but probing, "you say you went to the library to fetch a book. At what time, précisément, did you enter?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her eyes flickering to Dr. Warrender before returning to Poirot. "It must have been just before midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I thought a book might help." "And you found Sir Reginald? How?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his gaze was unwavering. "He was lying there," she said, her voice breaking, "on the desk with that thing in his chest. I screamed and ran out. I didn't touch anything, I swear." Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing his moustache. "And the book you sought, what was it?" She faltered. I don't remember. I was so shaken, I just grabbed the first thing I saw and left." "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "You went to the library, yet you cannot recall the title of the book. Most interesting." He turned to Doctor Warrender, who stood with his arms crossed, his face a mask of composure. "Doctor, you checked on Lady Beatrice at 10:30. Did you see her again after that?" "No," Warrender replied, his voice steady. "I went to my study to write letters, as I said. I heard the scream later and came running." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "These letters, they were of such importance that you wrote them past midnight. To whom, if I may ask?" Warrender's jaw tightened. "Personal correspondence. I don't see why it matters." "Everything matters," Poirot said, his tone mild but unyielding. "And your study, it is near the library, non?" Did you hear nothing? No voices, no footsteps, before the scream?" "Nothing," Warrender said firmly. "I was absorbed in my work." Poirot turned to Miss Clara Dunworth, whose thin frame seemed to bristle with indignation. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of sin in this house. What did you mean by that?" Miss Dunworth's lips pursed, her eyes glinting with fervour. Sir Reginald was a man of wealth and pride, surrounded by those who coveted his fortune. His wife, she paused, glancing at Lady Beatrice, was too young for him, and her affections questionable. And that Lyle fellow, always talking of money. It's no wonder evil came to this house. Lady Beatrice gasped, but Poirot raised a hand to silence her. "Mademoiselle Dunworth, you were praying in your room. Did you see or hear anything unusual before the scream?" "I heard footsteps in the hall," she admitted, her voice reluctant. "Around 11:30, perhaps, but I didn't look out. I was focused on my devotions." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Footsteps, most interesting. And you, Colonel Marlowe?" He turned to the military man, who sat stiffly in an armchair, his face flushed. "I told you, I was asleep," Marlowe said gruffly. "Heard nothing until the scream woke me. Dashed downstairs and found the poor chap dead." "And you, Monsieur Lyle, Mademoiselle Carver?" Poirot's gaze shifted to the young couple. "You were together in the drawing-room, discussing your wedding, yet you heard nothing until the scream." Lyle nodded, his hands in his pockets. "That's right. We were preoccupied." Miss Carver blushed, her voice soft. "We were talking about the future. It's true, we didn't hear anything." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, noting the way her fingers twisted her handkerchief. "Preoccupied," he repeated softly. "A wedding is a joyous thing. Yet you seem troubled, mademoiselle." "I'm not," she said quickly, then bit her lip. "It's just this horrible business. It's upsetting." "Naturellement," Poirot said, his tone soothing but his eyes sharp. He turned to the group as a whole. "Mes amis, you have given me much to consider. But there is one thing I must know. The will. Sir Reginald spoke of it last night. Who among you knew its contents?" A heavy silence fell. Lady Beatrice looked away, her hands stilling. Warrender's expression remained impassive. Miss Dunworth sniffed, as if the question offended her. Marlowe muttered something about private matters. Lyle and Miss Carver exchanged a glance, but neither spoke. Finally, Grayson, the butler, who had been standing silently by the door, cleared his throat. "If I may, sir," he said to Poirot, "Sir Reginald mentioned the will to me yesterday. He said it was to be finalized today with Mr. Hargreaves, his solicitor. He didn't share the details, but he seemed uneasy." "Uneasy?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "In what way, Monsieur Grayson?" "He said something about righting old wrongs," Grayson replied. "I didn't press him, sir. It wasn't my—" Plus Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You have been most helpful." He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, let us return to the library. There are details yet to be examined." As they left the drawing-room, Hastings whispered, "What do you make of it, Poirot? They're all hiding something, aren't they?" "Mais oui," Poirot replied, his voice low. "Each one has a secret, and each one lies in their own way. But the truth, Hastings, it is in the contradictions. The pearl earring, the blotting paper, the missing glass, these are the threads we must follow." In the library, Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his eyes darting over every surface. He paused at the desk, examining the brandy glass again. "One glass, yet 2 drank here," he murmured. "The second glass was removed. Why? To hide a poison, perhaps? Or to conceal the identity of Sir Reginald's companion?" He turned to the rug where the pearl earrings still lay. "This earring," he said, crouching to study it. "It is not merely a trinket. It belongs to someone in this house, and its presence here is no accident." Hastings frowned. "Lady Beatrice wears pearls, but I didn't notice earrings last night." "Précisément," Poirot said, "and yet she was in the library, or so she claims." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. "The blotting paper, Hastings. Let us examine it again." Using his magnifying glass, Poirot studied the smudges. "The words are clearer now. To my beloved, inheritance, disowned. A fragment of the will, perhaps, or a letter Sir Reginald wrote before his death. But why was it blotted here? And where is the original?" He moved to the bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines. Sir Reginald was a man of order, yet this shelf, it is disturbed. One book is slightly askew. He pulled out a volume of Shakespeare, revealing a small folded note tucked behind it. He unfolded it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he read. "What is it?" Hastings asked, leaning forward. "A note," Poirot said, his voice soft. "In Sir Reginald's hand it reads, 'Forgive me, my dearest, I cannot undo the past, but I will make amends.' It is not signed, but the ink matches the blotting paper." Hastings's eyes widened. "A clue! But who is my dearest?" "That, mon ami, is the question," Poirot said, slipping the note into his pocket. "We must speak to the solicitor, Mr. Hargreaves, when he arrives. The will, it is the heart of this mystery, and the heart, it always betrays the truth." As they left the library, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each guessed a piece in Poirot's intricate puzzle. Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. Poirot was closing in, and the truth, however elusive, could not hide for long. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The morning at Blackthorn Manor had deepened into a restless unease, the air thick with suspicion and the faint hum of whispered conversations. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his small frame radiating a quiet authority that silenced the nervous chatter of the guests. Captain Hastings, positioned by the window, watched his friend with growing anticipation. Poirot's methodical approach was like a chess master's, each move calculated to expose the weaknesses in his opponent's defences. The arrival of Mr. Hargreaves, Sir Reginald's solicitor, was imminent, and Hastings sensed that Poirot was poised to unravel the tangled threads of the mystery. Inspector Jarvis, however, was growing impatient. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice gruff, "we've got a clear suspect in Lady Beatrice. She was in the library, she admitted to it, and that earring, pearls, just like her necklace. It's obvious she's hiding something." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with amusement. "Obvious, mon cher inspector? The obvious is often the enemy of the truth. Lady Beatrice may have been in the library, but the earring, it is too convenient, no? Let us see what the others reveal before we cast the net." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their faces betraying a mix of fear and defiance. Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying, clutched her necklace tightly, her eyes darting to Dr. Warrender, who stood with his usual clinical detachment. Miss Clara Dunworth's lips moved in silent prayer, while Colonel Marlowe's scowl deepened. Victor Lyle, his earlier bravado diminished, hovered protectively near Miss Evelyn Carver, whose delicate features were drawn with exhaustion. Poirot turned to the group, his voice calm but piercing. "Mesdames et messieurs, the death of Sir Reginald Ashby is no simple crime. The missing will, the pearl earring, the note hidden behind the book, these are pieces of a puzzle. But there is more. I ask you now, who among you spoke with Sir Reginald last night, after dinner?" A heavy silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. Finally, Colonel Marlowe cleared his throat. "I had a word with him," he admitted gruffly. "Around 10:45, in the library. He wanted my advice on a military charity he was funding. We spoke for 10 minutes, no more. He was alive when I left." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A charity, you say? And his mood, how was it?" Marlowe hesitated. He seemed preoccupied, kept glancing at that envelope on his desk, said something about setting things right. I didn't press him. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Victor Lyle. "And you, Monsieur Lyle? You are a man of business, no? Did you discuss matters of finance with Sir Reginald?" Lyle's eyes narrowed, but he answered readily. "We talked earlier in the evening, before dinner. He was interested in my shipping venture, said he might invest, but I didn't see him after we all went to bed." "Yet you were in the drawing room, so close to the library." Poirot said softly, "And you heard nothing?" "Nothing?" Lyle insisted, though his hands fidgeted in his pockets. Miss Carver nodded in support. "We were together, as I said. We were planning our honeymoon." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, noting the slight tremor in her voice. "A honeymoon is a happy thing, mademoiselle. Yet you seem troubled. Ascolta, why is that?" "I'm not troubled," she said quickly, her cheeks flushing. "It's just this horrible business." Poirot turned to Miss Dunworth, whose disapproval was palpable. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of footsteps in the hall. Can you describe them? Heavy, light, hurried?" Miss Dunworth's eyes narrowed. "They were quick, like someone trying not to be heard. I thought it was one of the staff, but now—" She trailed off, her gaze flickering to Lady Beatrice. Before Poirot could press further, Grayson announced the arrival of Mr. Hargreaves, the solicitor. A wiry man with a pinched face and wire-rimmed spectacles, Hargreaves carried a leather briefcase and exuded an air of nervous efficiency. He bowed stiffly to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot, I came as soon as I received the news. A dreadful tragedy." "Indeed, monsieur," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. "You were to finalize Sir Reginald's will today. Tell me, what were its contents?" Hargreaves hesitated, glancing at Inspector Jarvis, who nodded. "The will was revised last week," Hargreaves said. "Sir Reginald wished to make significant changes. He left the bulk of his estate to Lady Beatrice, with substantial bequests to a military charity and a distant cousin, a Miss Margaret Ashby, whom he had not seen in years. There were other provisions, but they were minor." The guests stirred, their faces betraying shock. Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, while Colonel Marlowe's scowl deepened. Miss Dunworth muttered something about worldly greed. "A cousin?" Poirot asked, his tone sharp. "And why was she included?" Hargreaves adjusted his spectacles. Sir Reginald spoke of a family estrangement. He wished to make amends. The details were private, but he was adamant about her inclusion. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the previous will? Who stood to benefit?" Hargreaves hesitated. "The previous will favoured other parties. I'd rather not say more without the document." Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. "The document is missing, monsieur. But you will provide a copy, no? Of course, Hargreaves said. I have a draft in my office. I can send for it. As Hargreaves left to make arrangements, Poirot returned to the library, Hastings trailing behind. What do you make of it, Poirot? Hastings asked. Lady Beatrice seems the obvious culprit. She gains the most. Too obvious, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low. The earring, the scream, they point to her, but that is precisely the problem. A clever murderer does not leave such obvious clues. No, we must look deeper. He paused at the desk, his fingers brushing the blotting paper. This note, forgive me, my dearest, it suggests a personal motive, not merely financial. And the earring, it is too perfect, placed where we would find it. Someone wishes us to suspect Lady Beatrice. Hastings frowned. You think it's a setup? Perhaps, Poirot said. Let us consider the alibis. Colonel Marlowe was in the library at 10:45. Lady Beatrice claims she entered just before midnight. The scream came at 12:05. That leaves a window of time. Enough for someone to enter, kill, and take the will. He moved to the bookshelves, examining the spot where the note had been hidden. This note was placed deliberately, Hastings. It was meant to be found, but not immediately. The killer is playing a game, and we must be careful not to fall for their misdirection. They returned to the drawing room, where Inspector Jarvis was questioning Lady Beatrice again, his tone accusatory. That earring is yours, isn't it? He demanded, and you were in the library. I lost that earring weeks ago, Lady Beatrice cried, her voice shrill. I swear, I didn't do it. Poirot raised a hand. Inspector, let us not rush to judgment. The earring is a clue, yes, but it may point away from Lady Beatrice, not toward her. I propose we search the guests' rooms. There may be evidence, the will, the second brandy glass, or something else. Jarvis grunted but agreed, ordering his constables to begin the search. As they dispersed, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Mon ami, the red herrings are plentiful. The earring, the scream, they are designed to mislead. But the note, the blotting paper, the bent cigarette, these are the true clues. We must find the second glass, and the will. They will tell us who Sir Reginald met that night. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. And the cousin, Margaret Ashby, could she be involved? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. Or perhaps she is the dearest of the note. We must learn more about this estrangement. For now, observe the guests, Hastings. Their faces, their gestures, they will betray their secrets. As the search began, the manor seemed to close in around them, its walls whispering of hidden truths. Poirot's calm assurance was a beacon, but Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. The killer was among them, and the red herrings were only the beginning. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished floors of Blackthorn Manor. But the warmth of the day did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled over its inhabitants. The police search of the guests' rooms had yielded nothing conclusive. No missing will, no second brandy glass, no blood-stained clothing to point to the killer. Inspector Jarvis, his patience wearing thin, muttered about wasting time as he directed his constables to recheck the library. Captain Hastings, standing in the hallway outside the drawing-room, felt a growing sense of frustration, but Hercule Poirot remained unruffled, his green eyes gleaming with the quiet certainty of a man who saw order where others saw chaos. Poirot had requested a private moment in the library, and Hastings followed him, noting the detective's deliberate pace. The room, though still cordoned off, felt less like a crime scene now, and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The chalk outline of Sir Reginald's body remained on the oak desk, a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the manor's tranquillity. Poirot stood by the desk, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the blotting paper. "Hastings, mon ami," he said softly. "The little details, they are the key. The police, they search for the obvious, the will, the weapon, the blood. But the truth, it hides in the small things, the inconsistencies that whisper to Hercule Poirot." Hastings nodded, though he felt out of his depth. "The blotting paper again? You've looked at it a dozen times, Poirot. What more can it tell us?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. The blotting paper is a mirror. It reflects what was written. But it is not just the words that matter. It is their placement, their freshness." He produced his magnifying glass and leaned over the paper, his eyes narrowing. "See here, the ink is uneven. Some smudges are darker, others faint. This suggests two writings, one earlier, one later. The phrase, 'to my beloved,' is bold, but inheritance. It is lighter, as if written in haste." Hastings frowned. "You think Sir Reginald wrote two notes? Or someone else used his desk?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "We must consider all possibilities. But there is another detail, one I noticed earlier." He moved to the cigarette case on the desk, opening it with care. The 3 cigarettes lay inside, one still bent at an odd angle. "This case, it is silver, engraved with Sir Reginald's initials. A man of his fastidious nature would not tolerate a bent cigarette. Yet here it is. Why?" Hastings peered at the case. "Perhaps he dropped it, or someone else handled it." Poirot shook his head. "No, no. A man like Sir Reginald would replace a damaged cigarette at once. This bend, it is deliberate. A message, perhaps, or a mark of carelessness by another hand." He closed the case and turned to the rug, where the pearl earring still lay, untouched by the police at Poirot's insistence. "And this earring, Hastings? It is too perfect, too prominent. A woman does not lose one earring in a struggle without noticing. No, it was placed here to point us toward Lady Beatrice." "But why frame her?" Hastings asked. "She inherits the most from the will, according to Hargreaves. Wouldn't the killer want to avoid suspicion?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question. The killer wishes us to look at Lady Beatrice, but not too closely. It is a distraction, a red herring of the most cunning kind. But let us examine another detail. The note we found behind the book." He withdrew the folded paper from his pocket, the one reading, "Forgive me, my dearest. I cannot undo the past, but I will make amends." He studied it again, his fingers tracing the creases. "This note, it is in Sir Reginald's hand, but the paper is not from his desk. See the edges, they are slightly yellowed, as if from an older stock. Why would he use such paper for so personal a message?" Hastings's eyes widened. "You think it's old? From years ago?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps it was chosen to appear so. We must learn more about this, dearest, and the past Sir Reginald wished to amend." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "And there is one more detail, Hastings. The mantel clock. Did you notice its time?" Hastings glanced at the clock, which now read 2:15 p.m. "It's working fine, isn't it?" Oui, but last night when we first entered the library, it read 12:02 a.m., yet the scream came at 12:05. The police noted the time of death as approximately 11:30 to 12. If the clock was accurate, why does it not align with the scream? Hastings blinked. You think the clock was tampered with? Possibly, Poirot said, or it was stopped and restarted. A small thing, but significant. The killer, they wished to confuse the timeline. Their conversation was interrupted by Grayson, who appeared at the door, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Mr. Hargreaves has returned with a draft of the will. He's in the drawing-room with the others. Bon, Poirot said, his expression brightening. Let us hear what the solicitor has to say. In the drawing-room, the guests were gathered once more, their tension palpable. Mr. Hargreaves stood by the fireplace, his briefcase open on a side table, a sheaf of papers in his hand. Inspector Jarvis loomed nearby, his eyes fixed on Lady Beatrice, who sat with her head bowed. Monsieur Hargreaves, Poirot said, bowing slightly, you have the draft of Sir Reginald's will. Please, enlighten us. Hargreaves cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles. This is a copy of the revised will, dated last week. Sir Reginald left the bulk of his estate, Blackthorn Manor, his investments and liquid assets, to Lady Beatrice Ashby. A sum of £50,000 was bequeathed to a military charity, as Colonel Marlowe can attest. Another £20,000 was left to Miss Margaret Ashby, a cousin estranged for over 20 years. Smaller bequests were made to the staff, including Mr. Grayson, and a few local charities. The room stirred. Lady Beatrice's hands stilled, her eyes wide with surprise. Colonel Marlowe nodded grimly, while Miss Dunworth muttered about ill-gotten gains. Victor Lyle's face darkened, and Miss Carver gripped his arm. Poirot's voice cut through the murmurs. And the previous will, monsieur? Who benefited before these changes? Hargreaves hesitated, glancing at the guests. The previous will, dated 2 years ago, left the estate primarily to Sir Reginald's late brother's family, specifically his nephew, Mr. Victor Lyle, and a smaller portion to Miss Clara Dunworth, a distant relative by marriage. Lyle's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. That's nonsense! Reginald never mentioned cutting me out. Miss Dunworth's face flushed. Nor me. I had no need of his money, but to disinherit family. It's shameful. Poirot's gaze was steady. And yet he did. Why, Monsieur Lyle, did Sir Reginald change his mind? Lyle's jaw clenched. I don't know. We had a falling out over business, but I thought we'd patched it up. And you, Mademoiselle Dunworth? Poirot asked. You spoke of sin in this house. Did you know of this change? I did not, she said sharply, but I'm not surprised. Reginald was swayed by influences. Her eyes flicked to Lady Beatrice. Poirot turned to Hargreaves. This cousin, Miss Margaret Ashby, where is she now? I don't know, Hargreaves admitted. Sir Reginald provided an address in London, but I haven't contacted her. He said she was difficult to reach. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. Merci, monsieur. This is most illuminating. He turned to the guests. Mes amis, the will gives us motive, but not the killer. I ask you to remain here while I confer with the inspector. As they stepped into the hall, Hastings whispered, Lyle and Dunworth had reason to be angry. Losing an inheritance like that, it's a strong motive. Oui, Poirot said, but motive alone is not enough. The bent cigarette, the clock, the note, they point to something deeper, a personal betrayal. We must find the second brandy glass, Hastings. It will tell us who was with Sir Reginald when he died. As the day wore on, the manor seemed to tighten its grip, each clue a step closer to the truth and the killer. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Blackthorn Manor, casting a muted glow over the drawing room where the guests remained, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, meticulous figure a stark contrast to the sprawling unease of the room. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend with a growing sense of anticipation. Poirot's calm exterior belied the relentless workings of his little grey cells, and Hastings knew that each question, each glance, was a step toward unravelling the enigma of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder. Inspector Jarvis, his patience fraying, paced near the door. "Mr. Poirot, we've searched every inch of this place. No will, no second glass, nothing. I say we arrest Lady Beatrice and be done with it. She was there, and that earring's hers." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with quiet amusement. "Mon cher inspecteur, to arrest without certainty is to invite error. The earring, it is a clue, oui, but not necessarily to guilt. Let us delve deeper, into the hearts and secrets of those present." He turned to the guests, his voice soft but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the will of Sir Reginald has revealed much, motives of greed, of betrayal. But there is more to this crime than money. There is passion, there is pain. I ask you now, what secrets did Sir Reginald hold over you? For he was a man who knew much, no?" The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken truths. Lady Beatrice's hands trembled, her pearl necklace glinting as she twisted it. Dr. Philip Warrender's clinical detachment wavered, his eyes narrowing. Miss Clara Dunworth clutched her prayer book, her lips tight. Colonel Rupert Marlowe's face reddened, while Victor Lyle and Miss Evelyn Carver exchanged a fleeting, anxious glance. Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Beatrice. "Madam, you were married to Sir Reginald for 3 years. Yet your marriage, it was not without its shadows, was it?" Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, her voice sharp. "What are you implying, Monsieur Poirot? I loved my husband." "Love, oui," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "Yet love can coexist with secrets. Tell me, did Sir Reginald suspect you of indiscretions?" Her face paled, and she glanced at Dr. Warrender, who stiffened. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice barely audible. Poirot turned to Warrender. "Doctor, you are a man of science, yet you are close to Lady Beatrice. You checked on her last night, you say. Was it only concern for her health?" Warrender's jaw clenched. "I'm her physician. It's my duty to ensure her well-being, nothing more." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Duty, yes, but the heart, it does not always follow duty. There are rumours, no? Whispers of an affection that is more than professional." A gasp escaped Miss Dunworth, her eyes blazing. "I knew it! Sinful, shameful behaviour! I saw them in the garden last week, whispering like conspirators." Lady Beatrice stood, her voice trembling with fury. "That's a lie! Clara, you've always hated me. You've been poisoning Reginald against me for months." "Enough!" Colonel Marlowe barked, slamming his fist on the arm of his chair. "This is a house of mourning, not a stage for accusations." Poirot raised a hand, his calm unshaken. "Merci, Colonel, but accusations, they reveal truth. Mademoiselle Dunworth, you saw Lady Beatrice and Dr. Warrender. What else did you see in this house?" Miss Dunworth hesitated, her fervour tempered by Poirot's steady gaze. "I saw Victor Lyle arguing with Sir Reginald 2 days ago in the study. It was about money. Lyle was shouting about a loan." Lyle leapt to his feet, his face flushed. That's none of your business, you old bat. Yes, I asked Reginald for a loan for my business. He refused, and we argued, but I didn't kill him. Miss Carver gripped his arm, her voice soft. Victor, please, tell them the truth. Lyle's eyes widened, and he sank back into his seat, his bravado crumbling. All right, he muttered. Reginald wasn't just my uncle. He was my creditor. I owed him £10,000. He was going to call in the debt, and I begged him not to. He said he'd think it over. But then he changed his will. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A debt, a will changed. Most interesting. And you, Mademoiselle Carver? You are engaged to Monsieur Lyle. Did you know of this debt? She nodded, her eyes downcast. I did. Victor told me last week. I urged him to be honest with Sir Reginald, to work out a payment plan. But Victor, he has his pride. Pride, Poirot murmured. A dangerous thing, no? And you, Colonel Marlowe? You spoke of a charity with Sir Reginald. Was there more to your conversation? Marlowe's face reddened further. I told you, it was about the charity. He was generous, wanted to help veterans, that's all. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. Yet you were angry, Colonel. I see it in your eyes. Was Sir Reginald's generosity conditional? Marlowe's hands clenched, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Grayson, who stood silently by the door. Monsieur Grayson, you served Sir Reginald faithfully. Did he confide in you about these guests? Grayson hesitated, his composure wavering. He mentioned concerns, sir, about loyalty. He said he suspected someone in the house was not what they seemed, but he didn't name them. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. Merci. You have all given me much to ponder. But there is one secret yet to uncover. The second brandy glass. It was in the library, yet it is gone. Who took it and why? The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes avoiding Poirot's. Inspector Jarvis snorted. You're obsessed with that glass, Poirot. Maybe there wasn't one. No, Inspector, Poirot said firmly. There was a second glass. Sir Reginald did not drink alone. The killer, they removed it to hide their presence, or something more. As the guests dispersed to their rooms under police supervision, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Mon ami, les mensonges, ils se multiplient. Lady Beatrice and Dr. Warrender, they share a secret, perhaps an affair. Lyle's debt, it gives him motive. Miss Dunworth's zeal hides her own resentment. And Marlowe, he conceals something deeper. Hastings frowned. What about the note? Forgive me, my dearest. Could it be about Margaret Ashby, the cousin? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. We must learn more about this estrangement. But first, the glass. I have a theory. He led Hastings to the kitchen, where the staff were gathered under a Bichel constable's watch. Poirot approached the scullery maid, a nervous young woman named Elsie. Mademoiselle Elsie, he said gently, you clean the glassware, oui? Did you find a brandy glass this morning, perhaps in an unusual place? Elsie's eyes widened, and she nodded. Yes, sir. I found one in the pantry behind a sack of flour. It wasn't with the others from dinner. I washed it and put it away. Poirot's face lit up. Washed? Mon Dieu! But describe it, s'il vous plaît. It was like the one in the library, Elsie said. Crystal, with a gold rim. But it had a funny smell. Not like brandy. Bitter. Like medicine. Poirot's moustache quivered with excitement. Merci, Elsie. You have been most helpful. He turned to Hastings. A bitter smell, Hastings. Poison, perhaps, or a sedative. The killer used the glass, then hid it to conceal their method. But who? Hastings asked. And why hide it in the pantry? To buy time, Poirot said. The killer knew the glass would be found eventually, but not before it was washed. We must test the sink, the drains. There may be traces. as they returned to the drawing room. Poirot's mind was clearly racing. The glass, the note, the earring, these are not random. The killer is clever, but they have made a mistake, and Hercule Poirot will find it. The manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each revelation a step closer to the truth. Hastings felt the weight of the mystery, but Poirot's confidence was unshakable. The lies were surfacing, and the killer's mask was beginning to slip. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The atmosphere in Blackthorn Manor had grown taut as a bowstring, each guest teetering on the edge of composure as the day wore on. The drawing room, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a stage where hidden truths were clawing their way to the surface. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small frame radiating a quiet intensity that commanded the room. Captain Hastings, seated by the window, watched his friend with a mix of awe and apprehension. Poirot's methodical probing had begun to crack the facades of the guests, and Hastings sensed that a breaking point was near. Inspector Jarvis, his frustration mounting, stood by the door, his arms crossed. "Mr. Poirot, this is getting us nowhere. We've got the earring, Lady Beatrice's presence in the library, and now this glass business. It's her, plain as day." Poirot's green eyes flickered with amusement, but his voice was firm. "Mon cher Inspector, the plain and the simple are rarely the truth. The glass, the earring, these are threads in a tapestry, but the pattern is not yet clear. Let us press on, for the heart of this mystery lies in the hearts of those present." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. Lady Beatrice Ashby sat rigid, her hands no longer twisting her pearl necklace, but clenched tightly in her lap. Dr. Philip Warrender's clinical calm was fraying, his fingers tapping restlessly on the arm of his chair. Miss Clara Dunworth's prayer book lay closed, her eyes burning with righteous indignation. Colonel Rupert Marlowe's face was flushed, his military bearing strained. Victor Lyle and Miss Evelyn Carver sat close together, their faces pale, their hands entwined as if seeking strength. Poirot's voice was soft but piercing. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have learned much. Debts, betrayals, a will that shifted fortunes. But there is a deeper wound here, one that drove a hand to plunge a letter-opener into Sir Reginald's heart. I ask you now, not for alibis, but for truth. Who among you felt such pain, such anger, that murder became the answer?" The silence was suffocating, broken only by a sharp sob from Lady Beatrice. She stood, her eyes brimming with tears, her voice trembling. "I can't bear it any longer. Yes, I was in the library, but not to kill him. I went to talk to Reginald, to beg him to trust me. He thought I was unfaithful with Philip, Dr. Warrender. It wasn't true, but he wouldn't listen." Dr. Warrender rose, his face pale but resolute. "Beatrice, stop! You don't have to—" "No!" she cried, turning to him. "I must. Reginald was cold, distant, always watching me. That night, he accused me of an affair, said he'd change the will again if I didn't confess. I told him there was nothing to confess, but he laughed, a cruel, bitter laugh. I left him alive, I swear. I dropped my earring weeks ago, and someone must have placed it there to frame me." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his tone remained gentle. "Madam, your pain, it is genuine. But why did you not tell us this before?" "I was afraid," she whispered, sinking back into her seat. "I thought no one would believe me." Warrender stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "I'll speak, Poirot. Beatrice is telling the truth. I care for her, yes, but not as a lover. She was unhappy, trapped in a marriage with a man who saw betrayal in every shadow. I offered her friendship, nothing more. That night, I checked on her at 10:30, as I said. She was upset, talking of leaving Reginald. I urged her to stay calm and went to my study. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing his moustache. And yet, Doctor, you did not tell us of this conversation. Why? Warrender hesitated. I didn't want to make things worse for her. The police already suspect her. Poirot turned to Miss Dunworth, whose righteous indignation seemed to falter under his gaze. Mademoiselle, you saw Lady Beatrice and Dr. Warrender in the garden. You spoke of sin. Was it only your moral judgment, or did you know more? Miss Dunworth's lips trembled, and for the first time her certainty wavered. I overheard Sir Reginald and Beatrice arguing last week. He called her a traitor, said she'd humiliated him. I thought she deserved his scorn, but I didn't. No, he'd changed the will to favour her. It's unjust. Unjust? Poirot asked, his voice sharp. You too were in the previous will, were you not? Did you feel betrayed by Sir Reginald's decision? Miss Dunworth's eyes flashed, but her voice cracked. I didn't need his money. But to cast me aside, after years of loyalty to the family, it was a slap in the face. Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor Lyle, whose bravado had all but vanished. Monsieur Lyle, you owed Sir Reginald a debt. You argued with him. Did he threaten to ruin you? Lyle's hands clenched, his voice hoarse. He did. He said if I didn't repay the £10,000 by next month, he'd seize my business. I begged him to give me time, but he was merciless. I didn't kill him, Poirot. I needed him alive to change his mind. Miss Carver's eyes filled with tears. It's true, she whispered. Victor was desperate, but he wouldn't kill. I told him we'd find another way together. Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. And you, Colonel Marlowe? You spoke of a charity, but there is more, no? What did Sir Reginald hold over you? Marlowe's face darkened, his voice low. You're a devil, Poirot, digging into a man's soul. All right, I'll tell you. Reginald knew something about my past. A mistake during the war, a decision that cost lives. He didn't blackmail me, but he held it over me, said he'd expose it if I crossed him. I kept my distance, but that night he hinted he'd reconsider the charity donation. I left him alive, I swear. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. Merci, mes amis. You have bared your hearts, and in doing so, revealed much. But there is one more piece, the second glass. Elsie, the maid, found it in the pantry, washed but with a bitter smell. A sedative, perhaps, or poison. Who among you used it? The guests froze, their eyes darting to one another. Finally, Grayson, the butler, stepped forward, his face ashen. Monsieur Poirot, I must speak. I didn't want to say before, but I saw something that night. After dinner, I was in the hall clearing the glasses. I saw Miss Carver near the library door, holding a glass. She looked frightened. Miss Carver gasped, her hands flying to her face. No, that's not true. I was with Victor in the drawing room. Lyle gripped her hand, his voice fierce. Grayson, you're lying. Evelyn was with me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Monsieur Grayson, you are certain of this? Grayson hesitated, then nodded. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't want to cause trouble, but I saw her. Poirot turned to Miss Carver, his voice gentle but unyielding. Mademoiselle, the truth, it will come out. If you were near the library, why? Tears streamed down her face, and she shook her head. I wasn't. I swear I was with Victor. Grayson's mistaken. Or he's lying to protect someone. The room erupted in murmurs, accusations flying like sparks. Inspector Jarvis stepped forward, his voice booming. That's enough, Miss Carver. You're coming with us for questioning. Poirot raised a hand, his authority unshaken. Non, Inspector. Let us not be hasty. Mademoiselle Carver, you are distressed, but I believe you. The glass, the earring, the note, they point to a deeper truth. We must find the will, and we must find Margaret Ashby. She is the key. As the guests dispersed under police watch, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Mon ami, the emotions, they betray the truth. Miss Carver's fear, Grayson's hesitation, they are pieces of the puzzle. The killer is close, but they are clever. We must be cleverer. Hastings nodded, his heart pounding. What's next, Poirot? The trap, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. We will gather them all, and the truth will have nowhere to hide. The manor seemed to pulse with secrets, the emotional cracks widening. The killer was among them, and Poirot was closing in. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening shadows stretched long across Blackthorn Manor, cloaking the drawing-room in a sombre half-light that mirrored the tension among its occupants. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, meticulous figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion. Captain Hastings, positioned near the fireplace, felt his pulse quicken. Poirot had hinted at setting a trap, and Hastings knew his friend's methods were never haphazard. The guests, seated in a tense semicircle, wore expressions ranging from defiance to dread, their secrets laid bare, yet still shrouded in half-truths. Inspector Jarvis, his patience nearly exhausted, stood by the door, his arms crossed. Mr. Poirot, this had better be good. We've got Lady Beatrice's earring, Miss Carver's sighting near the library, and a missing will. I'm ready to make arrests. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet confidence. Mon cher Inspector, an arrest without proof is like a house without a foundation. It will crumble. Tonight, we will set a trap, not with force, but with the mind. The killer, they are among us, and they will reveal themselves. He turned to the guests, his voice steady and commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Sir Reginald Ashby is a puzzle of many pieces. The pearl earring, the hidden note, the missing will, the second brandy glass. Each of you has a motive, a secret, a lie, but one of you has blood on your hands. I propose a simple test. We will recreate the moments before the murder, and we will see who falters. The guests stirred, their faces betraying unease. Lady Beatrice clutched her hands, her eyes wide. Dr. Philip Warrender's clinical calm wavered, his fingers twitching. Miss Clara Dunworth's lips moved in silent prayer, while Colonel Rupert Marlowe's scowl deepened. Victor Lyle gripped Miss Evelyn Carver's hand, his bravado replaced by a nervous energy. Poirot continued, his tone deliberate. Last night, Sir Reginald was in the library, alive at 10:45 when Colonel Marlowe left him. Lady Beatrice claims she entered just before midnight, finding him dead. The scream came at 12:05. Someone was with Sir Reginald between 11 and midnight, drinking brandy, writing a note, perhaps arguing. The second glass, hidden in the pantry, held a bitter substance, a sedative, I believe, to dull Sir Reginald's senses before the fatal blow. Who among you will confess to this meeting? The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each guest. No one! Then let us test your memories. Monsieur Grayson, please bring the crystal brandy glasses from the cabinet. Grayson, pale but composed, fetched 6 identical glasses, their gold rims glinting in the firelight. Poirot placed them on a table, alongside a decanter of brandy. We know Sir Reginald drank with someone. The second glass was hidden, but its contents betrayed the killer's method. I have asked the police to analyze the pantry sink for traces of the substance. The results will come soon, but first, let us see who is drawn to the glass." He poured brandy into 2 glasses, placing them on the desk in a deliberate mimicry of the crime scene. "Imagine, mes amis, it is last night. Sir Reginald is here, alive, speaking with his companion. Who was it? Step forward, and let us reenact the moment." The guests hesitated, their eyes darting to the glasses. Finally, Dr. Warrender spoke, his voice tight. "This is absurd, Poirot. I was in my study, as I said. I had no reason to meet Reginald." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Yet you were close to Lady Beatrice, Doctor. Did Sir Reginald suspect an affair, as she claims? Did he confront you?" Warrender's face flushed. "He did, earlier that day. He was wrong, but he wouldn't listen. I didn't see him after dinner." Poirot turned to Miss Carver, whose delicate frame trembled. "Mademoiselle, Grayson saw you near the library, holding a glass. Why were you there?" Miss Carver's eyes filled with tears. "I wasn't. I was with Victor. Grayson's lying, or he's mistaken." Lyle leapt to his feet, his voice fierce. "She's telling the truth, Poirot. I'd stake my life on it." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "Then let us test another theory. The note, forgive me, my dearest, suggests a personal betrayal. Monsieur Hargreaves, you mentioned Margaret Ashby, the estranged cousin. Have you reached her?" The solicitor, seated quietly in the corner, shook his head. "Not yet, Monsieur Poirot. The address Sir Reginald provided is outdated. I've sent a telegram, but no reply." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Curieux. An heiress who cannot be found. Let us return to the glasses. Colonel Marlowe, you were in the library at 10:45. Did you see brandy poured?" Marlowe's face reddened. "Number Reginald offered me a drink, but I declined. I don't touch the stuff after dinner." "And you, Mademoiselle Dunworth?" Poirot asked. "You heard footsteps. Did you see anyone with a glass?" Miss Dunworth's eyes narrowed. "I saw nothing, but I know sin when I see it, and this house is full of it." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, you are in the library. Did you see a second glass?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Number only the one on the desk. I swear I didn't touch it." Poirot stepped closer to the table, his eyes fixed on the glasses. "Then let us try an experiment. Each of you, take a glass and hold it as you would if you were drinking with Sir Reginald. Do not drink, merely hold it." The guests hesitated, but under Poirot's unrelenting gaze, they complied. Lady Beatrice's hand shook as she lifted a glass, her fingers barely grazing the rim. Warrender held his firmly, his expression unreadable. Miss Dunworth refused, muttering about worldly temptations. Marlowe gripped his glass like a weapon, his knuckles white. Lyle and Miss Carver held theirs awkwardly, their hands trembling. Poirot watched closely, his eyes narrowing. Interesting. The way one holds a glass, it reveals much. But there is one more test. He turned to Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, you found the glass in the pantry. Can you show us exactly where?" Grayson led them to the pantry, a cramped space off the kitchen. He pointed to a corner behind a sack of flour. "Here, sir. It was tucked away like someone didn't want it found." Poirot crouched, examining the spot. "And the sink where Elsie washed it. Inspector, have your men found anything?" Jarvis nodded grudgingly. "They're testing the drain now. Preliminary results suggest traces of a sedative, chloral hydrate. Not enough to kill, but enough to make someone drowsy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Bon. The sedative was in the glass, given to Sir Reginald to weaken him before the letter opener struck. The killer knew his habits, knew he would drink, but who? He returned to the drawing room, the guests trailing behind. Mes amis, the trap is set. The killer is nervous now, for the truth is close. I ask you to remain here tonight, under the inspector's watch. Tomorrow, we will have answers. As the guests dispersed, their faces pale, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. Mon ami, the trap is not the glasses alone. It is the fear they inspire. The killer believes we are close, and they will make a mistake. The note, the glass, the earring, they point to Margaret Ashby, but she is not here. We must find her, or the truth will slip away. Hastings nodded, his heart pounding. What's your plan, Poirot? To watch, Poirot said, his voice low. The killer will move tonight, to cover their tracks, and Hercule Poirot will be waiting. The manor seemed to hold its breath. The trap set, the killer cornered. The truth was near, and Hastings felt the weight of the coming revelation. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The night had settled over Blackthorn Manor like a heavy velvet curtain, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of the old house and the distant hoot of an owl. The drawing-room, dimly lit by a single lamp, was a stage set for the final act of Hercule Poirot's meticulous drama. The guests, summoned once more, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces pale and drawn, each bearing the weight of their secrets. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his heart pounding with anticipation. Poirot's trap had been set, and now, as the clock struck 9, the little Belgian detective prepared to unveil the truth. Inspector Jarvis, his skepticism barely contained, leaned against the wall. His arms crossed. Mr. Poirot, I hope this isn't another of your theatrics. We've got evidence pointing to Lady Beatrice and Miss Carver. Let's wrap this up. Poirot's green eyes sparkled with quiet confidence. Mon cher, Inspector, the evidence, it points, yes, but not where you think. The truth, it is like a diamond, hidden in the rough, revealed only by careful cutting. Tonight, Hercule Poirot will cut away the lies and show you the murderer of Sir Reginald Ashby. The guests stirred, their eyes darting to one another. Lady Beatrice clutched her hands, her face ashen. Dr. Philip Warrender's clinical calm was gone, replaced by a tense alertness. Miss Clara Dunworth's prayer book lay forgotten, her lips tight with apprehension. Colonel Rupert Marlowe sat rigid, his fists clenched. Victor Lyle and Miss Evelyn Carver held hands, their faces pale with fear. Poirot stepped forward, his voice clear and commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, let us reconstruct the night of the murder. Sir Reginald Ashby was killed in the library between 11 and midnight, stabbed with a letter opener. The will was taken, a pearl earring left behind, a note hidden and a brandy glass concealed. These clues, they are not random. They tell a story of betrayal, of vengeance, of a past that would not stay buried. He turned to the desk where he had placed the blotting paper, the cigarette case, and a replica of the earring. We begin with the timeline. Colonel Marlowe spoke with Sir Reginald at 10:45, discussing a charity. Lady Beatrice entered just before midnight, finding him dead. The scream came at 12:05. The clock, it read 12:02, suggesting it was stopped or tampered with. Why? To confuse the time of death. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The second brandy glass, found in the pantry, held traces of chloral hydrate, a sedative. Sir Reginald was drowsy when the killer struck, making the act easier. The glass was hidden, washed, but the bitter smell betrayed it. The earring, it points to Lady Beatrice, but it is too obvious, a deliberate misdirection. The note, "Forgive me, my dearest," speaks of a personal debt, a past wrong, and the will, it shifts fortunes, naming Margaret Ashby, an estranged cousin, as a beneficiary. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Let us consider the motives. Monsieur Lyle, you owed Sir Reginald £10,000, and he cut you from the will. Mademoiselle Dunworth, you too were disinherited, your pride wounded. Colonel Marlowe, Sir Reginald held a secret over you, a wartime mistake. Dr. Warrender, you were close to Lady Beatrice, suspected of an affair. And Lady Beatrice, you stood to gain the most, yet you claim innocence." The guests shifted, their tension palpable. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. "But there is one person we have not seen, Margaret Ashby. Monsieur Hargreaves, you said her address was outdated, yet Sir Reginald wished to make amends. Why?" Hargreaves, seated in the corner, adjusted his spectacles. "Sir Reginald spoke of a family quarrel 20 years ago. Margaret was his niece, not cousin, disinherited after a scandal. He regretted it, wanted to restore her inheritance." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A niece, not a cousin. Most interesting. And this scandal, what was it?" Hargreaves hesitated. "I don't know the details. Sir Reginald was vague, said it was a private matter." Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising. "The note, it was written to my dearest. Who was she? Not Lady Beatrice, whose marriage was strained. Not Miss Dunworth, whose connection was distant. Not Miss Carver, whose loyalty is to Monsieur Lyle. No, it was Margaret Ashby, the niece Sir Reginald wronged. But where is she?" He paused, his eyes locking onto Miss Carver, who flinched under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Carver, you have been quiet, yet Grayson saw you near the library, holding a glass. You deny it, yet your fear betrays you. Tell me, what is your true name?" Miss Carver's eyes widened, her hands trembling. I don't know what you mean. I'm Evelyn Carver." Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze was unyielding. "No, mademoiselle. You are Margaret Ashby, the niece Sir Reginald sought to reconcile with. You came here under a false name, engaged to Monsieur Lyle, to confront your uncle. The note was written to you, was it not?" The room gasped. Lyle leapt to his feet, his face pale. "That's ridiculous! Evelyn's my fiancée. She's not some long-lost niece." Miss Carver, Margaret, burst into tears, her voice breaking. "It's true. I'm Margaret Ashby. I came here to see Uncle Reginald, to ask why he abandoned me. He wrote that note, begging forgiveness, but he was too late. I didn't kill him, I swear." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "Calm, mes amis. Mademoiselle, you were in the library, were you not? You drank with him, you argued, you left the glass." Margaret nodded, sobbing. "I went to him at 11. He was kind, remorseful. He gave me brandy, said he'd changed the will to include me. I was angry, but I didn't kill him. I left him alive." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the glass, it was laced with chloral hydrate, but not by you. No, the killer used your presence to their advantage." He turned to Doctor Warrender, whose face had gone deathly pale. "Doctor, you had access to sedatives. You knew Sir Reginald suspected you of an affair with Lady Beatrice. You feared he would change the will again, cutting her out. So you acted." Warrender's voice was hoarse. "That's preposterous. I was in my study." "No, Poirot said, his voice like steel. "You followed Margaret to the library. You saw her leave, and you entered, lacing Sir Reginald's brandy with chloral hydrate. When he was drowsy, you stabbed him, took the will, and planted the earring to frame Lady Beatrice. You hid the glass in the pantry, knowing it would be washed. But you made a mistake. The bent cigarette. You handled Sir Reginald's case, leaving it imperfect, a mark of your haste." Warrender staggered back, his face ashen. "You have no proof." Poirot smiled, faintly. "The police will find traces of chloral hydrate in your medical bag, I am certain. And the will, it is hidden in your room, behind the mirror, a place you thought safe." Jarvis, stunned, signalled his constables. "Search his room, now!" As the police moved, Warrender's composure collapsed. "All right," he shouted. "I did it! Reginald was going to ruin Beatrice, expose her, cut her out. I loved her, and I couldn't let him destroy her." Lady Beatrice gasped, her hands covering her face. The room erupted in shock, but Poirot remained calm, his eyes fixed on Warrender. "You killed for love, Doctor, but love does not justify murder. The truth, it always finds a way." As Warrender was led away, the manor seemed to exhale. The weight of the mystery lifted. Hastings stared at Poirot, marvelling at his genius. The trap had worked, and the killer was caught. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The air in Blackthorn Manor seemed lighter now, as if the revelation of Dr. Philip Warrender's guilt had lifted a suffocating veil from the old house. The drawing-room, bathed in the soft glow of early evening, was quiet. The guests dispersed to their rooms under the watchful eyes of Inspector Jarvis's constables. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, meticulous figure a picture of calm satisfaction, though his green eyes held a trace of melancholy. Captain Hastings, seated in an armchair, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and relief. The puzzle of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder had been solved, but Poirot's work, Hastings knew, was not yet complete. Inspector Jarvis, his earlier scepticism replaced by grudging respect, approached Poirot, his moustache twitching. "Well, Mr. Poirot, I'll give you this. You've got a knack for sniffing out the truth. We found the will behind Warrender's mirror, just as you said, and traces of chloral hydrate in his medical bag. He's confessed to everything. Case closed." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but tinged with weariness. "Merci, Inspector. But the case, it is never truly closed until we understand the why, not just the how. The human heart. It is a complex thing, non?" Jarvis grunted, unconvinced. "He killed for love, or so he claims. That's enough for me. I'll leave the philosophizing to you." He turned to oversee the constables, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "Poirot, you were magnificent. The way you pieced it together, the earring, the glass, the note, it was like watching a maestro conduct an orchestra. But how did you know it was Warrender?" Poirot's moustache twitched, and he gestured to a chair. "Sit, mon ami, and let Hercule Poirot explain. The truth, it is always in the details, but it is the heart that guides us to them." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "From the beginning, I saw that the crime was not one of chance. The pearl earring, placed so conveniently near the body, was too obvious. Lady Beatrice, she was the perfect suspect. Her presence in the library, her inheritance, her strained marriage. But the obvious Hastings, it is the enemy of truth. The earring was a plant, meant to mislead. He paused, his eyes gleaming. Then the second brandy glass, hidden in the pantry with traces of chloral hydrate. This told me the killer planned the act, weakening Sir Reginald before striking. The glass was washed, but the bitter smell remained, a mistake. The note, "Forgive me, my dearest," spoke of a personal debt, not financial, but emotional. The blotting paper confirmed it, a fragment of Sir Reginald's remorse, written in haste. Hastings nodded, his mind racing to keep up. And the bent cigarette? "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft. Sir Reginald was a man of order, his cigarette case pristine. A bent cigarette was an anomaly, a sign of another's hand. Dr. Warrender, in his haste, touched the case, perhaps to steady himself as he struck. It was a small thing, but it betrayed him. "And Margaret Ashby?" Hastings asked. "How did you know Miss Carver was her?" Poirot smiled faintly. The note, it was too personal for a stranger. Sir Reginald's regret, his mention of righting old wrongs to Grayson, pointed to a family tie. When Monsieur Hargreaves revealed Margaret was a niece, not a cousin, I suspected Miss Carver. Her nervousness, her reluctance to speak of her past, it was the fear of discovery. When Grayson saw her near the library, I knew she was involved, but not as the killer. She was the catalyst. Hastings frowned. But why did Warrender kill? Was it really for Lady Beatrice? Poirot's expression grew sombre. Oui, but it was more than love. Warrender saw Sir Reginald as a tyrant, controlling Lady Beatrice's life, threatening to expose her and ruin her. The will, naming her as the primary heir, was a double-edged sword. Sir Reginald could change it again, as he threatened during their argument. Warrender acted to protect her, but also to secure his own future with her. Love, Hastings, it can drive a man to madness. He paused, gazing into the fire. The tragedy of this case is not just the death of Sir Reginald, but the secrets that festered in this house. Each guest, Lyle with his debt, Dunworth with her pride, Marlowe with his shame, carried a burden. Margaret Ashby, hiding her identity, sought reconciliation, only to find herself entangled in murder. And Lady Beatrice, trapped in a loveless marriage, became the pawn in Warrender's deadly game. Hastings shook his head, marvelling. "You saw it all, Poirot. The way you set the trap, making them think you were close, it forced Warrender to crack." Poirot's smile was tinged with sadness. The trap, mon ami, was not just the glasses or the reenactment. It was the pressure of truth, the knowledge that Hercule Poirot sees what others do not. Warrender's confession was inevitable, for the guilty heart cannot bear scrutiny. He straightened, adjusting his tie with characteristic precision. "But now, Hastings, we must leave this place. The police will handle the rest, and Blackthorn Manor must heal its wounds." As they prepared to depart, Lady Beatrice approached, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "thank you. I didn't know Philip would go so far. I feel responsible." Poirot took her hand gently. "Madame, you are not to blame for the actions of another. Live well, and honour your husband's memory by finding peace." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and turned away. Margaret Ashby, now openly acknowledged as Sir Reginald's niece, stood nearby, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "I only wanted to forgive him," she whispered. "Now I must live with this." Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle, you have a second chance. Use it wisely." As they stepped into the cool evening air, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its ivy-clad walls looming in the dusk. "It's a sad business, Poirot. All this pain, all these secrets." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice quiet. "The human heart, it is both beautiful and terrible. But the truth, Hastings, it brings order, even to chaos. And that is why Hercule Poirot exists." They climbed into the waiting taxi, the manor fading into the twilight behind them. Hastings felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering unease. Poirot, however, sat back, his eyes closed, his mind already turning to the next puzzle. The Nemesis enigma was solved, but the world, Hastings knew, was full of mysteries waiting for the little Belgian detective. Chapter 12. Shadows of Motive. The morning following Dr. Warrender's confession dawned crisp and clear over Blackthorn Manor, yet the weight of the previous night's revelations lingered like a persistent mist. The guests, no longer confined to the drawing room, moved about with a subdued air, their conversations hushed and their glances guarded. Hercule Poirot, ever the picture of precision, stood in the manor's entrance hall, adjusting his hat with a meticulous hand. Captain Hastings beside him felt a restless energy, as if the case, though solved, had left threads still dangling in the wind. Inspector Jarvis approached, his face a mix of relief and irritation. "Mr. Poirot, the paperwork's done. Warrender's on his way to the station, and the will's been secured for probate. I suppose you'll be off to London now?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief. "Not quite, mon cher Inspector. There are still matters to clarify. Not for the law, perhaps, but for the understanding. The motive of Dr. Warrender, it is clear, but the shadows of other motives, they intrigue me." Hastings frowned, puzzled. Other motives? But Warrender confessed. Poirot. He killed Sir Reginald to protect Lady Beatrice. What more is there? Poirot's moustache twitched. Mon ami, a confession closes the case, but it does not always close the heart. Each person in this house had a reason to resent Sir Reginald. I wish to understand these shadows, for they tell us much about the human condition. He gestured toward the garden, where the roses glowed in the morning light. Let us walk, Hastings, and speak with those who remain. The truth, it is not only in the crime, but in the lives it touched. They found Lady Beatrice in the rose garden, her hands gently pruning a bush, her face pale but composed. She looked up as they approached, her eyes weary but resolute. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said softly, I owe you my gratitude. I was afraid I'd be blamed, but you saw the truth. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, the truth is my profession. But tell me, how do you fare now, knowing Dr. Warrender's actions were for you? Her hands stilled, and she looked away, her voice low. I feel guilty. Philip thought he was saving me, but I never asked for it. Reginald was difficult, yes, but I didn't wish him dead. I only wanted freedom. Poirot's gaze softened. Freedom, it is a powerful motive. Did you know of the note Sir Reginald wrote, the one to his dearest? She shook her head. Number I thought he despised me, that he saw only betrayal. If he wrote to someone else, it wasn't me. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly turning over her words. Merci, madame. You have been most candid. They moved on, finding Margaret Ashby, formerly Miss Evelyn Carver, sitting on a bench by the fountain, her delicate features drawn with sorrow. Victor Lyle stood nearby, his hands in his pockets, his expression a mix of protectiveness and uncertainty. Mademoiselle Ashby, Poirot said, his voice gentle, You have faced a great ordeal, revealing your identity. Why did you come here under a false name?" Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I wanted to confront Uncle Reginald to ask why he cast me out all those years ago. My mother, his sister, married against his wishes, and he disowned us. When she died, I was left with nothing. I heard he was revising his will, and I wanted to know if he'd softened. I used Evelyn's name to get close, through Victor." Lyle stepped forward, his voice gruff. "I didn't know her real identity until yesterday, Poirot. She told me after dinner, before the murder. I was angry, but I love her. I'd never hurt Reginald, even if he was a hard man." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the debt, Monsieur Lyle?" "It weighed heavily on you." Lyle's jaw tightened. "Yes, but I thought I could convince him to give me time. Murder wouldn't solve anything. It'd only make things worse." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Margaret. "The note, mademoiselle. Forgive me, my dearest. It was for you, was it not?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "He gave it to me that night in the library. He said he was sorry, that he'd changed the will to include me. I was so angry, but I couldn't hate him. I left him alive, I swear." "I believe you," Poirot said softly. "Your truth has helped us see the light." As they walked back toward the manor, they encountered Miss Clara Dunworth, her prayer book tucked under her arm, her face stern but less severe than before. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice sharp, "have you come to accuse me again?" "No, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, his tone mild. "I seek only to understand. You felt betrayed by Sir Reginald's will, yes? Why did you resent him so?" Miss Dunworth's lips pursed. "He was family, however distant. I served his household, advised him, yet he cast me aside for strangers. It was unjust, but I didn't kill him. My faith forbids it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Faith, it is a powerful force. But resentment, it can cloud even the most pious heart. You saw much in this house. Did you see Dr. Warrender's intentions?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I suspected he cared for Beatrice too much. I told Reginald, hoping to protect him. I was wrong." Poirot bowed. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candour is appreciated." Finally, they found Colonel Marlowe on the terrace, smoking a cigar, his military bearing restored, but his eyes haunted. "Poirot," he said gruffly, "you've done your job." "Why linger?" "To understand, Colonel," Poirot said, "Sir Reginald held a secret over you, a wartime mistake. Did it drive you to anger?" Marlowe's face darkened. "It did. He knew about a failed operation under my command, lives lost through my error. He never let me forget it, but I didn't kill him. I'd rather face disgrace than murder." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Courage, it takes many forms. You have shown it by speaking." As they returned to the entrance hall, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, why all these questions? Warrender's confessed. What are you looking for?" Poirot's smile was tinged with melancholy. "The truth, Hastings, is not just the name of the killer. It is the why, the pain, the love, the regret that drove this tragedy. Each of these souls carried a burden, and Sir Reginald's death was the spark that ignited them. I seek to understand, so that we may learn." Hastings nodded, moved by his friend's compassion. "And now, back to London?" "Oui," Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "But first, I will ensure Monsieur Hargreaves contacts Margaret Ashby properly. Her inheritance, it is her right, and her healing must begin." As they stepped into the waiting taxi, the manor loomed behind them. Its secrets laid bare, but its wounds still raw. Poirot sat back, his eyes half closed, his mind already turning to new horizons. Hastings, watching the Dorset hills fade into the distance, felt a quiet admiration for his friend, the man who saw not just the crime, but the humanity behind it. Chapter 13. Didax, the Hidden Truth. The soft light of late morning filtered through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor, casting intricate patterns on the polished floors. The house, though quieter now with Dr. Warrender's arrest, still hummed with an undercurrent of unresolved tension. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit and waxed moustache as pristine as ever, stood in the library, his green eyes scanning the room where Sir Reginald Ashby had met his end. Captain Hastings, at his side, sensed that his friend was not yet ready to leave, despite the case being officially closed. Poirot's mind, he knew, was still sifting through the finer grains of the mystery, seeking truths that lay beyond the murderer's confession. Inspector Jarvis, preparing to depart with his constables, approached Poirot with a nod of reluctant respect. "Mr. Poirot, you've done us a service. Warrender's locked up, the will's recovered, and the case is airtight. I don't know how you do it, but I'm glad you are here." Poirot's smile was polite, but tinged with a trace of dissatisfaction. "Merci, Inspector. But the work of Hercule Poirot is not only to catch the guilty, it is to illuminate the shadows. There are truths in this house that remain hidden, truths that explain why such a tragedy came to pass." Jarvis raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "More truths? The man's dead, the killer's caught. What else is there?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The heart, mon cher Inspector. It holds secrets that the law does not see. Come, Hastings, let us speak with those who remain, for their stories are not yet complete." They found Margaret Ashby in the drawing-room, seated alone, her delicate hands folded in her lap. Her face, though still marked by sorrow, held a flicker of resolve. Poirot bowed slightly, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle Ashby, you have faced great pain, coming here as Evelyn Carver to reclaim your place. Tell me, what did Sir Reginald say to you in the library that night?" Margaret's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "He was remorseful. He said he'd been wrong to disown my mother, to cut us off. The note, forgive me, my dearest, was for me. He gave it to me, said he'd changed the will to give me £20,000 to make amends. I was angry, but I couldn't hate him. I left him alive, Monsieur Poirot, I swear." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And the brandy you drank with him, did it taste unusual?" She frowned, thinking, "It was bitter, now that you mention it. I thought it was just the brandy, but I felt drowsy afterward. I went to the drawing-room to find Victor, and that's where we stayed until the scream." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most interesting. The sedative was not meant for you, mademoiselle, but for Sir Reginald. Dr. Warrender used your presence to his advantage, lacing the brandy after you left." Margaret's eyes widened. "Then I was part of his plan?" "Unwittingly, oui," Poirot said. "Your return stirred old wounds, and Warrender saw an opportunity to act, framing Lady Beatrice while using your meeting to cover his tracks." As they left Margaret, they encountered Victor Lyle in the hallway, his face drawn with worry. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "is it true about Evelyn, Margaret? She's really Sir Reginald's niece?" "Oui," Poirot replied. "And you, Monsieur Lyle, did not know her true identity until recently. Did this change your feelings for her?" Lyle shook his head, his jaw tight. Number, I love her, whatever her name. But that debt to Reginald, it nearly ruined me. I thought he'd give me time, but he was going to call it in. I didn't kill him, though. I needed him alive. Poirot's gaze was piercing. And yet you argued with him. Did he mention Margaret to you? Lyle hesitated. He said something about family coming back to haunt me. I didn't know what he meant until now. I thought he was talking about business rivals. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. They moved to the terrace, where Colonel Rupert Marlowe stood, his cigar smoke curling into the air. His military bearing was intact, but his eyes held a haunted look. "Poirot," he said gruffly, "you've got your man. Why are you still poking around?" "To understand, Colonel," Poirot said, "Sir Reginald held a secret over you, a wartime mistake. Did he ever hint at forgiveness?" Marlowe's face darkened. "Number, he used it to keep me in line, said he'd expose me if I stepped out of bounds. I hated him for it, but I didn't kill him. I've faced worse than disgrace." Poirot's expression softened. "Courage. It is not only in battle, but in truth. You have shown it, Colonel." Their final stop was the rose garden, where Miss Clara Dunworth knelt, tending the flowers with a surprising gentleness. She looked up as they approached, her stern face softening slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, have you come to judge me further?" "No, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "I seek only clarity. You resented Sir Reginald's choices, his wealth, his wife. Did you know of Margaret Ashby's return?" Miss Dunworth's lips pursed. "I suspected something. Reginald was secretive, talking of making amends. I thought it was about Beatrice's indiscretions. I was wrong, and I regret my harshness." Poirot bowed slightly. "Regret. It is the beginning of wisdom. Merci, mademoiselle." As they returned to the library, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, why all this?" "Warrender's guilty. What are you looking for?" Poirot's eyes were distant, his voice soft. "The why, Hastings? Warrender killed for love, yes, but also for fear. Fear of losing Lady Beatrice, fear of Sir Reginald's power. The others, they too were driven by fear, by pride, by loss. Margaret's return was the spark, but the fire was built long ago, in the secrets of this family." He paused by the desk, his fingers brushing the blotting paper. The note, the earring, the glass, they were pieces of a larger truth. Sir Reginald's remorse, his desire to right old wrongs, stirred the past. Warrender saw his chance, using Margaret's presence to mask his crime. But the others, their motives, their pain, they shaped the stage. Hastings nodded, moved by his friend's insight. "And now? Is it truly over?" "Oui," Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "The law has its justice, and we have our understanding. Let us leave this place, mon ami, and let it heal." As they stepped into the hall, the manor seemed quieter, its shadows less oppressive. Poirot's work was done, but his reflections lingered, a testament to the complexity of the human heart. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The late afternoon sun bathed Blackthorn Manor in a golden glow, softening the harsh edges of its ivy-clad walls. The house, though still marked by the tragedy of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder, seemed to breathe easier, as if the unmasking of Dr. Warrender had loosened the grip of its secrets. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes gleaming, stood in the entrance hall, preparing to depart. His green eyes, ever sharp, held a quiet satisfaction, but also a trace of introspection. Captain Hastings, at his side, felt the case was resolved, yet Poirot's lingering presence suggested there were still threads to be tied. Inspector Jarvis, his paperwork complete, approached with a brisk nod. "Mr. Poirot, the van's ready to take Warrender to London. The will's with the solicitor, and the manor's secure. I reckon you've earned a rest." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Rest, mon cher Inspector. For Hercule Poirot, the mind never rests until all is clear. There are final threads to this mystery, not of guilt, but of understanding. The why, it is as important as the who." Jarvis raised an eyebrow, his skepticism softened by respect. "You and your philosophizing. Well, you've got my thanks. Safe travels." He strode off, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. Hastings adjusted his hat, puzzled. "Poirot, what more is there? Warrender's confessed, the will's found, and Margaret Ashby's identity is clear. What threads are left?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice soft. "Mon ami, a crime is like a tapestry. Each thread, each colour tells a story. We have caught the killer, but the motives, the pains, the regrets, they weave a pattern we must fully see. Let us make one final round, to ensure no shadow remains." They began in the drawing-room, where Lady Beatrice sat alone, a cup of tea untouched before her. Her face, though pale, held a newfound calm. She rose as they entered, her voice steady. "Monsieur Poirot, I've been thinking of what you said, about honouring Reginald's memory. I'll sell the manor, start anew. I can't stay here, not after everything." Poirot bowed slightly. "A wise choice, madame. But, tell me, did Sir Reginald ever speak of Margaret Ashby to you?" Lady Beatrice shook her head. "No, never. He was secretive about his family. I knew he had regrets, but he kept them locked away. If I'd known about Margaret, perhaps—" She trailed off, her eyes glistening. Poirot's expression softened. "Regrets, they are heavy burdens. You are free now, madame. Live well." They found Margaret Ashby and Victor Lyle in the garden, seated on a bench, their hands entwined. Margaret's face was still marked by sorrow, but her eyes held a spark of hope. Lyle looked up, his expression wary but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot, we're leaving tomorrow. Margaret's inheritance will help us start over, away from all this." Poirot nodded, his gaze on Margaret. "Mademoiselle, you came seeking answers, and found tragedy. What will you do with your uncle's gift?" Margaret's voice was soft but firm. "I'll honour my mother's memory. She loved him, despite everything. I'll use the money to build something good, a school, perhaps, for children like I was, left behind." Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. "A noble purpose. And you, Monsieur Lyle? The debt is no longer a shadow over you." Lyle's jaw tightened. "I'll pay it back somehow, to the estate. I don't want his money tainting our future." Poirot smiled faintly. "Pride, it can be a virtue as well as a vice. Bon courage, monsieur." They moved to the terrace, where Miss Clara Dunworth stood, her prayer book tucked under her arm, her stern demeanour softened by the day's events. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice less sharp than before, "I misjudged you. You saw the truth where I saw only sin." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, judgment is easy, understanding is hard. You resented Sir Reginald, but you did not act on it. That is your strength." She nodded, her eyes distant. "I'll return to my parish. There's work to be done, and I've learned humility." Their final stop was the library, where Colonel Marlowe stood by the desk, staring at the spot where Sir Reginald had died. His military bearing was intact, but his eyes held a quiet pain. "Poirot," he said gruffly. "You've cleared my name, but I'll carry that secret, the wartime mistake, to my grave." Poirot's voice was gentle. "Colonel, the past cannot be changed, but the present can be lived with honor. Sir Reginald's hold over you is gone." Marlowe nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll keep supporting the charity. It's what he wanted in the end." As they left the library, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, you've given them all a chance to move forward. But what about Warrender? Do you think he truly loved Lady Beatrice?" Poirot's expression grew sombre. "Oui, Hastings, he loved her. But it was a love twisted by fear and desperation. He saw Sir Reginald as a barrier, not just to her happiness, but to his own. The sedative, the letter, opener, they were the tools of a man who believed he had no other choice. Yet choice, it is always there, and he chose wrongly." They stepped into the entrance hall, where Grayson, the butler, awaited with their coats. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice steady. "The house feels lighter thanks to you. Will you return?" Poirot shook his head. "No, Monsieur Grayson, my work here is done, but you have served well. Ensure the manor finds peace." Grayson bowed, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "I will, sir." As they climbed into the waiting taxi, the manor loomed behind them, its secrets no longer a burden. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who sat back, his eyes half closed, his mind at rest. "You've done it again, Poirot," Hastings said. "You've not only solved the crime, but you've given them closure." Poirot's smile was faint but warm. "Closure, mon ami, is the gift of truth. The threads are tied, the tapestry complete. Now, let us return to London, where new puzzles await." The taxi rolled down the gravel drive, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its healing. The Nemesis enigma was resolved, but Poirot's quiet reflection spoke of a deeper truth, that every crime, every heart, held a story worth understanding. Chapter 15. The Departure. The sun dipped low over the Dorset hills, casting a warm amber light across Blackthorn Manor as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to leave. The manor, though scarred by the tragedy of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder, stood serene in the evening glow, its ivy-clad walls whispering of secrets now laid bare. Poirot, his black patent leather shoes gleaming, adjusted his hat with characteristic precision, his green eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. Hastings, standing beside the waiting taxi, felt a sense of completion, yet the weight of the case lingered in his mind, a testament to the complexity of human motives. The manor's entrance hall was nearly empty, save for Grayson, the butler, who stood with a dignified air, holding Poirot's overcoat. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Grayson said, his voice steady. "The household owes you a great debt. You've brought clarity to our darkness." Poirot bowed slightly, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. Clarity, it is the gift of truth. You have served this house well. Continue to guide it toward peace." Grayson nodded, a flicker of emotion in his eyes. "I shall, sir. Safe travels." As they stepped outside, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. "It's strange, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "The case is solved, the killer caught, yet I feel there's something unfinished." Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice soft. "Mon ami, you are perceptive. A case is never truly finished, for it lives in the hearts of those it touched. The murder of Sir Reginald was but a moment, but the ripples, love, regret, redemption, they endure. Hercule Poirot solves the crime, but the human soul, it writes its own epilogue. They paused by the taxi, where Lady Beatrice emerged from the garden, her face pale but composed. She approached, her hands clasped, her pearl necklace absent, a symbol, perhaps, of her intent to start anew. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I've decided to donate a portion of the estate to Margaret's school. It's what Reginald would have wanted, I think." Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. "A generous act, madame. It will bring light to the shadows of this place. You have found strength, no?" She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Thanks to you. I was afraid, but now I see a path forward." As she turned back to the garden, Margaret Ashby and Victor Lyle appeared, their hands entwined, their faces marked by a cautious hope. Margaret stepped forward, her voice soft. "Monsieur Poirot, I've received word from Mr. Hargreaves. The inheritance is mine, and I'll use it as I promised. For the school, for children who need it. Thank you for giving me this chance." Poirot bowed, his expression warm. "Mademoiselle, you have turned pain into purpose. That is true courage. And you, Monsieur Lyle?" Lyle's jaw tightened, but his voice was firm. "I'm standing by her, Poirot. We'll build something good together, debt or no debt." Poirot nodded, his smile approving. "Bon, love, when it is true, overcomes much. Go well, both of you." As they walked away, Miss Clara Dunworth approached, her stern demeanour softened by a newfound humility. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her prayer book tucked under her arm, "I misjudged many here, including you. I'll return to my parish with a lighter heart, thanks to your work." Poirot's gaze was kind. "Mademoiselle, to see one's errors is to grow. Your faith will guide you." Finally, Colonel Rupert Marlowe emerged from the terrace, his cigar extinguished, his military bearing tempered by reflection. "Poirot," he said gruffly, "you've cleared my name, and I'm grateful. I'll keep the charity going for Reginald's sake." Poirot inclined his head. "Honour, Colonel, it is your legacy. Carry it with pride." As Marlowe retreated, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice tinged with admiration. "You've done more than solve a murder, Poirot. You've given them all a chance to move forward, to heal." Poirot's smile was tinged with melancholy. "Oui, Hastings. The crime, it is a wound, but the truth, it is the salve. Dr. Warrender's love for Lady Beatrice drove him to murder, but the others, their fears, their regrets, they were the kindling. Margaret's return, the note, the will, they set the stage, but it was Warrender's choice that lit the flame." He paused, gazing at the manor one last time. The earring, the glass, the bent cigarette. They were the clues, but the true mystery was the human heart. Sir Reginald sought redemption, but it came too late. Yet, in his death, others found their own. Hastings nodded, moved by his friend's insight. "And now, back to London?" "Oui," Poirot said, stepping into the taxi. "The city awaits, with its own puzzles and passions. But for now, mon ami, let us enjoy the journey, for even Hercule Poirot must rest his little grey cells." The taxi rolled down the gravel drive, the manor fading into the twilight. Hastings watched the hills slip by, a sense of peace settling over him. The Nemesis enigma was complete, its truths uncovered, its lessons enduring. Poirot sat beside him, his eyes half closed, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The world was full of mysteries, and Hercule Poirot would always be ready to meet them.